guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Licensed Arborist Trespassed on My Property and Destroyed My 15-year-old Tree Without Permission. Still to this day, I cannot wrap my mind around why someone would come onto another person's property and maim their trees without permission. I have always taken great pride in my yard. I enjoy tending to the flower beds and grooming the 15-year-old eucalyptus tree that resides on the eastern half of my property. I'm a bit of a botany nerd and perhaps, subconsciously, purchased this home partially because of the eucalyptus tree. It's just fabulous. It's mature and weepy, with hanging branches that really catch the morning sunrise perfectly. I have a beautiful bay window in my kitchen that overlooks the tree and the sun, and it honestly couldn't be more perfect some days. My neighbors also have a beautiful yard, but they have a gentleman, named Greg, that has taken care of it for as long as I've lived here, which is going on 8 years. He's always been respectful and nice and, in the wintertime, he would even clear my driveway. He knows that I don't have a husband and I have always appreciated his generosity. One day I left to run some errands and take care of other business, and when I came home, I realized very quickly that my poor eucalyptus tree had been butchered. It was almost like a personal attack. My heart hurt when I saw the pathetic and bare state it was in. These long and weepy branches take years to grow, and they have been cut back carelessly. I was full of disbelief, then anger as I wanted to find out what had happened. It was Tuesday and Greg was often overworking on my neighbor's yard on that day, however he was gone by the time I got home. I managed to get a hold of my neighbors and asked them if they thought Greg had anything to do with it, and they assumed no but said that they would check for me. The missus called me back a few hours later and said that he did indeed admit to cutting my tree. They were both very sorry for the damage to the eucalyptus tree and said that they would find a new landscaper to do their work. They never would have condoned that if they realized it was happening. They also mentioned that Greg is apparently a licensed landscaper and arborist too. Which is crazy to me because he did such a shit job of trimming my tree. This made me even more angry. He should know better. Not to mention that the branches were cut very far back, much farther than the property line, which I know they have the right to trim if it is on their side. I managed to get a hold of a different licensed arborist to come and assess the damage done to the tree. Thankfully, this woman informed me that the tree should survive the assault, but it will take many years for it to grow back most of the branches that he removed. She said that she felt like the damage was around $5,000. Before I decided to contact any lawyers, I wanted to talk with Greg first. It took several days and many ignored phone calls before he finally answered. I could tell that he knew that it was me the whole time and that he was avoiding me. His tone was impatient and grouchy right away. Before I could get too many words in, he started accusing me of having him fired from my neighbor's job and that I would end up costing him more money if I didn't leave him alone. After I was finally able to discuss my eucalyptus tree, he stated that he did me a favor when he trimmed the branches. When I asked him why he would do this, he said that he was sick and tired of the stupid branches hitting him in the face when he was mowing the grass. I understand that would be frustrating, but I wouldn't say that it's a good enough reason to destroy my tree. He started to get short with me when I mentioned that the arborist I hired said that there was at least $5,000 worth of damages done. He proceeded to say that my professional didn't know what they were talking about and that he could come over to the house and remove the eucalyptus branch from my ass if I wanted him to. I hung up on him and continued to fume. I couldn't even get over what a boss he was being. He couldn't even just admit that he was wrong. I went onto the neighborhood app, Nextdoor, and mentioned on the landscaping section that Greg had been a reputable gentleman until he butchered my eucalyptus tree. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, I know it can affect his livelihood. Well, he was quick to contact me on his own this time. I'll sue you for defamation of character and slander if you say one more thing about me on Nextdoor or any other media. From there I told him that I would report him to the licensing agency for landscapers and arborists and that I really only wanted an apology and admittance of guilt. He instead began shouting obscenities and other things at me, clearly seeing red at this point. We screamed at each other for a moment and one of us hung up first, not sure which. I do realize that I was angrier and more hurt by Greg cutting my eucalyptus tree branches. Thankfully, it would survive the event, but would be far less attractive for a while. I had managed to groom the tree and keep it in excellent shape for so long. I was even more annoyed about the whole thing because I was very fastidious about keeping it looking nice and maintaining the limbs and overhanging branches. I know for a fact that cutting them back was not doing me or my freaking tree any favors. After receiving a nasty text message from Greg a few days later, I decided that I would pull the trigger on suing him for damages. His text said that he would come and cut down the entire tree if I didn't keep my name out of his mouth and that I would need to be watching my back for costing him money. I found this to be a threat, so I was going all in after that. I found my lawyer, who was my friend's son James, a handsome and successful young man who was excited to help me with my case. It didn't take too long of gathering information, and thankfully my neighbors across the street had cameras that captured Greg cutting my tree limbs. We made quick work of him in the courtroom. It's hard to deny video evidence and a written statement by my neighbors, confirming him admitting to doing the damage. He originally was going to argue and say that he didn't do it, but once he found out there was camera footage, he decided to change his tune. The judge awarded me the $5,000 and a restraining order because of his text message, telling me to watch my back. James was able to find me the licensing organization that handles landscapers and arborists, and I reported Greg to them. They agreed that the destruction of my poor eucalyptus tree was unacceptable and something that a licensed professional should not do. He was reviewed by their professional board and put on probation for his offense. I was overall very pleased with the way things turned out. While dealing with the entire ordeal did cost me time and money, I was happy that me and the eucalyptus tree were able to have some justice for what was done that day. In no way, shape or form is it ever acceptable for someone to come onto another person's property and damage anything. Greg may have been a nice guy in the past and I didn't mind the snow shoveling, but that's probably because he wasn't coming through and destroying anything. I also think that probation was an appropriate solution for what happened. I wouldn't want to ruin his entire career and take away his livelihood. I just hope that he has learned his lesson from this mistake. The next story is titled, Neighbors Read Their Contract. This is a story from a year ago involving my neighbors, thought it was worth a share. My neighbors were selling their house and had been screwed left and right by the buyers. For background, neighbor learned he was being relocated to another city. Partner and he started working out the details, and their house went on the market and was quickly closed with a deal pending. If you've never bought a house before, closing can take between 45 and 60 days with things like inspections, necessary repairs, etc. So, they started down that process. Their buyers came off sweet but quickly turned sour. The people they hired to inspect my neighbor's house were family members, and they came away with a huge sheet of things to be repaired or to knock down the price. Many of those repairs they demanded be fixed at my neighbor's expense by a different contractor, despite the fact that my neighbor is a contractor himself. Then, they started sending people to house unannounced, totally illegal, and showing up to the property on their own, trespassing. The nail in the coffin was that my neighbors had been strung along for a full 10 days longer than they should have been because the buyers kept threatening to back out of the sale, despite having already signed paperwork without their knowledge. All very muddy. As part of the contract, the buyers said that needed to take all personal property and all debris, claiming a financial penalty for cleanup if there was anything on the property that the buyers thought counted. So, my neighbors had spent a lot of time cleaning out yard debris, multiple dump runs, etc. But as the purchase was almost finalized and all this shitty stuff was happening, they had an idea. While one is a contractor, the other works in legal and has for 10 years. She took to the contract and local home purchase regulations for the definition of personal property. Turns out that besides the obvious, light bulbs also count. They went through and removed every light bulb they could find, except ones that were installed as part of fixtures. The sellers had to purchase nearly $200 worth of light bulbs as part of their move-in, which they did not discover until they showed up with moving trucks. The next story is titled, Snow Shoveling Dramas. I am reminded of a story that happened while I was living at home. You may enjoy it. This happened in the late 90s, early 2000s for reference. My dad owned a snowblower. During the wicked weather this side of the Rockies, he would use his blower to take care of the sidewalks in front of everyone on both sides of our block. Most of the families on my block were either seniors, those with small families, or younger couples that inherited their dead relative's home. Everyone knew everyone, and they understood that my dad was doing this as a courtesy. He was in his 50s and just trying to be a good neighbor. So, my neighbors 2 doors down divorce and sell their house to a family from out of state. Fake name time. Picard sounds good. I know they were from a snowy state, but I don't remember where. They moved in during the late summer, close to the start of the school year. A couple months later, our state has a massive snowstorm. It would snow for nearly 24 hours for almost the entire winter. You would shovel and clear snow just to get another dump, and you'd have to keep going and going. We had something like 350% of average snowfall that month alone. So, my dad is out there during the first big dump with his snowblower, just taking care of business as he's nice, and the third house down had an occupant that walked on arm crutches. He just made a path from our house to theirs. No big deal, been taking care of this for a while now. He gets done and heads to work. He gets home late most nights, so he's not expecting anyone to be at the door as he walks in. Lo and behold, the Picards must have been watching out the window for him as they walk up on him as he opens the door. "Hey, did you shovel our walk?" "Huh? Our walk? The one that runs in front of our house?" "Oh yeah, I did your sidewalk." "Well, we're not paying you for the shoddy work you did. You sprayed our tree with snow." My dad is out of it after a 10+ hour day, commute not included, so he's not getting what's happening. "I'm sorry? You should be. That tree is too small to handle that much snow blown on it. You need to blow it somewhere else." As my dad was one that religiously read city bylaws, he knew the time frame for removing snow and where you could put shoveled snow. The city doesn't allow you to blow snow into the street because it messes with the plow's ability to take care of the streets. But Mr. Picard insisted that he had to blow the snow elsewhere. Knowing what he knew, my dad directed the snow into the only other spot available, his driveway. A driveway that is almost 45 degrees down from the carport too. Or so it seemed, wicked steep either way. So, the next day, the neighbor comes by to complain again. He didn't know that a small snowfall can get cars stuck in that driveway, let alone what we had plus a snowblower. His car got stuck halfway in the street and he had to get it towed out. If my dad were home, he could have saved them the tow fee, but Picard didn't know that. So, Picard is fuming and saying he's going to do his own walk from now on. My dad tries to tell him he's just assisting the neighbor on the other side, and he doesn't charge for being a good neighbor, etc. It's cold and my dad wants the door shut, but Picard doesn't want to step in, and my dad doesn't have his shoes or coat. So, Picard just says, "I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. I can deal with a little fluff." The next day, my dad knocks on the neighbor's door and tries to tell Picard about how strict the city is about snow removal, and how he has 24 hours from the start of snowfall to get things removed, etc. He wrote down a website where he can go to read the rules, but Picard didn't take it. The city was constantly driving down our block for reasons I won't go into here. The Picards were doing a semi-sufficient job manually shoveling snow away properly, but then. October in my state has a big teachers' conference, and most families go out of town for a late camping or early hunting trip. So did the Picards. They are gone for 4 days during the worst storm of the season. They hadn't arranged to have the walk shoveled, and the snow was piling so high, city inspectors came out. Parents and neighbors complained to the city that they couldn't walk down our street. It was obvious that the walks were being taken care of, so why not theirs? The city posted a 48-hour compliance notice, but it would be 72 before the Picards got back to town. The city charged them with hazardous conditions and failure to maintain property accessible to the public. On top of the labor fee to shovel the walk, it was like $350 easily. The city kept a watchful eye on the property for the rest of the winter for any issues from then on. Once the city has you on their radar, it's hard to be done with them. The cherry on top of the entire situation, there's a knock on the door in early November, same year. One of the Picard kids handed my sister an envelope and just walked away. We give it to my mom, and inside there's a note saying something like, "This is for the shoveling you did already." There was $100 bill inside. My family tried to return it, but they never answered the door. So, we used it to take our large family out to our favorite buffet later that week. Thank you, Picards, for paying for a free service. We spent it well. The last story is titled, Tractor or Tractor Trailer? There is a young man in the neighborhood that lives with his folks. He is a great mechanic. He loves older trucks and other weird vehicles. He and his buddy are always working on something and help others fixing cars, lawnmowers, etc. Just a really cool kid. He also has this really cool older John Deere tractor. He can be seen driving it around the neighborhood occasionally. He will give kids rides on it and helps out at the local community animal park. He parks the tractor in the street on the side of his house. It's really only about the size of a full-sized truck. Well, his neighbor across the street decides they don't like it and call the cops. They come out and say he can't park it on the street as it isn't legal. So, he parks it on his lawn for a while. Then one day he shows up with this massive flatbed trailer and parks it in the same place on the street. It is 2.5 times the length of the tractor and almost twice as wide. It's 4 feet off the ground with a built-in retractable ramp. He plops the tractor on it and over time adds a bunch of other stuff. Tires, cooler, wood, whatever engine he is currently working on. The trailer is fully licensed and parking it on the street is perfectly legal. Thanks for listening.